Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Colonel Diane Klein. I'm the commander of DISA European Field Command, commonly referred to as DISA Europe. We are headquartered in Stuttgart, Germany. Our mission is to support the European theater through the European Command headquarters in Stuttgart, as well as its service components throughout the theater. I also have two small forward field offices that both support and act as liaisons for DISA's UK and NATO interests. With me today is Mike Porter, the Plans and Policy Branch Chief at DISA, or J353. Mr. Porter led DISA's operational planning team that supported DISA Europe with the crisis action planning for EUCOM during the months leading up to the crisis, and he spent several months TDY at DISA Europe headquarters during that time frame. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to highlight the actions that DISA took leading up to the invasion of Ukraine and also throughout and ongoing. For the purposes of this brief, I will use DISA to refer to the actions taken by DISA Europe and DISA together rather than differentiate. So I'm just going to say DISA, unless needed for clarity. This was a total team, no-fail effort to react to emerging requirements. We drew support not only from each other, but also our partners in the UK and with NATO, and worked stronger together toward innovative solutions, both technical and procedural, to provide a resilient, robust network secured from adversary eyes. My intent is to share, clarify, and provide insight on what DISA has learned thus far in our support to Ukraine. I'll start with a brief overview of the events that led up to the invasion, discuss the DISA response within theater and throughout the agency, and then talk about how industry supported the effort. This is an unclassified presentation, obviously, and so I'm going to be keeping it at a high level without going into a lot of detail on the technical or procedural side. I'll be happy to answer any questions with Mike next to me at the end of the presentation. So let's begin. So our story starts in 2014. If you recall, prior to this, all was well in Europe. The security situation had been deemed stable enough that the US had substantially scaled back its forces there. It had taken out the tanks. Defense spending throughout Europe and NATO was generally pretty low. DISA had also undergone some substantial changes, and DISA Europe was scaled back commensurate with those force changes with the US within the continent. Then, in March of 2014, Russia annexed Crimea, that strategic gem with its isthmus that connected Russia to the southern part of Ukraine, plus its deep water port. The NATO and the European governments condemned this action, along with the US, but stopped short of military aid or action to Ukraine. The US imposed strict sanctions on Russia, but this had little effect on Putin. In 2016, the NATO-Ukraine assistance package was formed to boost NATO's support for Ukraine and strengthen its defenses by building stronger security structures. Allied ministers also discussed the security situation in eastern Ukraine with Ukrainian Defense Minister Stephen Poltorak. In May of 2018, Putin completed the 12-mile bridge, the Crimea Bridge, connection to the mainland, an engineering feat providing a permanent connection between Crimea and Russia for motorized traffic as well as rail traffic. In April of 2019, Ukraine elected Vladimir Zelensky as the new president, and he immediately began expressing his concerns about Russian aggression to the international community. In 2021, analysts began to notice Russian troop movements that were amassing on the Ukraine border. Putin claimed it to only be military training, but the U.S. Department of Defense and NATO, including DISA, began to churn in anticipation of possible Russian action against Ukraine. Now, throughout this time period, the Department of Defense was undergoing a technical revolution as it evolved to meet a changing tech and security environment. As you can see from the blue arrows on the top, Defense Enterprise Email was fully implemented in 2014. The Joint Forces Headquarters Department of Defense Information Network, or JFHQ DODIN, was established to provide centralized command and control. SIPR went mobile. Transport circuits and access points were upgraded. And in 2021, DISA created a surge capacity to provide support to a field command in the event of a crisis, consisting of people and planners to send forward as needed. All of this occurred in an environment with a persistent cyber threat, as bad actors routinely probed and attempted cyber attacks throughout the world and against DoD networks, increasing in number and sophistication every year. I'm sure some of you remember several of those from the past couple years, usually happening around Christmas time. And then on 24 February 2022, approximately 0500 Kiev time, Putin announced a special military operation in the country and crossed violently into Ukraine. DoD, NATO, DISA, and DISA Europe had been monitoring the situation throughout the 9 months prior. DISA deployed its newly created surge capacity, a force package of military, civilians, and contractor SMEs from headquarters that augmented DISA Europe planners and engineers at DISA Europe in Stuttgart. There are 5 main efforts that DISA focused on and continues to focus on in its response to the Ukraine crisis. These are listed at the top of the slide. I'll go through each one of these. Maybe not. 1 second, please. Oops. Something happened to my kids. Okay, I apologize. Something happened to my build slides there. I will take you through them. I apologize for it being slow. So effort number 1 was the Eastern European infrastructure expansion and diversity. This realized the acute need to expand, speed up, and modernize the network across the theater, including our mission partners, and increase redundancy, security, and resilience. Some of the key network improvements we undertook involved modernizing circuits, in many cases upgrading from 1 gigabyte to 10 gigabytes, as we eliminated antiquated low-speed links from low-speed links to multi-protocol label switching. DISA greatly reduced the normal time it would have taken to extend multiple nodes eastward, as required by the inbound 18th Airborne Task Force, known as the Security Assistance Group Ukraine, or SAGU, and we streamlined the change request process for internet access points to enable the warfighter to access collaborative products that were used by the international community, and thus increased communication interoperability using web-based interfaces to exchange information across individual partner networks without having to cross into the DODN. Many of these changes were enabled by DISA's IT contracting office, DITCO, as they reacted with unprecedented speed to implement or modify contracts with industry partners and a variety of national telecom providers. In addition, the DISA NATO field office assisted with configuring handheld radios used by the Ukraine forces. So for effort number 2, which was the integrated air missile defense, all of the improvements I just talked about impacted the resiliency and redundancy and the capabilities of our integrated air missile defenses in theater. The hardening of these network systems was critical for these defenses, and these improvements helped to make a more secure air picture for the continent, U.S. interests, and our allies. For our exercise support, effort number 3, this is another key effort in keeping the continent safe. It includes our mission partners, and it is achieved through combined exercises. We have participated and continue to participate in several of these exercises that strengthen those partnership bonds. Austere Challenge is an ongoing exercise that supports NATO and coalition mission partners. Since the 1990s, it is focused on combatant command, coordination and integration of capabilities, and functions across U.S. EUCOM and its component commands. U.S. agencies and partner nations also participate. After a COVID and then a real-world hiatus, Austere Challenge 2023 is back to full scale and involves 14 countries this year and will also include some cyber training injects suggested by DISA Europe. Locked Shields is a DISA and EUCOM-supported cyber defense exercise for the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, or the NATO CCDCOE. Locked Shields is an annual exercise organized since 2010 that tests and enhances cybersecurity experts' skills in defending national IT systems and critical infrastructure under real-time attacks. The focus is on realistic scenarios, cutting-edge technologies, and simulating the entire complexity of a massive cyber incident, including strategic decision-making, legal, and communication aspects. It is a red team versus blue team exercise that takes place in a simulated environment on a separate network. The red teams are U.S. cyber professionals comprised of DISA, EUCOM, and university college students that attempt to penetrate the blue teams that are formed by the member nations of the CCDCOE. To keep up with technology developments, Locked Shields focuses on realistic scenarios and cutting-edge technologies, relevant networks, and attack methods. The red teams operate out of a West Virginia National Guard location in West Virginia, and the White Cell runs operations from Tallinn, Estonia, which makes it truly a global cyber environment. And lastly, we have the Coalition Warrior Interoperability Exercise, or CWIX. This is the biggest interoperability event of its kind in NATO. Alliance and partner nations test and assess their command and control capabilities, interoperability, as a essential first step towards NATO missions and reducing cyber risk. It is also a test bed for interoperability specifications that are hardwired into experimental and near-to-fielding capabilities that will be ready for future NATO missions. For effort number 4, which is our cybersecurity service provider, or our CCSP, and our defensive cyber operations, DISA significantly improved its capability to provide cybersecurity for a combatant command network. We enhanced support capacity through innovative upgrades to processing power, educating and training the workforce, and investing in infrastructure upgrades to in-place monitoring sensors and then analyze the data to identify any adversary activity or anomalies in the network. We engaged with the U.S. EUCOM J6 to ensure that the required bandwidth was in place in order to support the ever-growing requirement for U.S. EUCOM to communicate with our NATO partners and the Joint Forces Commands in Brussels and Naples, and prove that DISA can be the security provider of choice. And lastly is effort number 5, the Ukraine contingency support. All of these aforementioned efforts wouldn't have been possible without the contingency support provided by DoD and DISA. I already mentioned the force package that DISA headquarters deployed to act as a project management team and support the planning operations. Using those resources, in early 2022, DISA conducted a tabletop exercise with the U.S. EUCOM's Operational Planning Team, or OPT, to examine the threat. DISA headquarters responded with a unified approach, and our own OPT worked in conjunction with planners at DISA headquarters and EUCOM and the EUCOM OPT and throughout the globe. So DISA also surged on secure mobile devices. As I mentioned in the timeline, SIPR went mobile. SIPR went mobile in 2020. DISA made the decision to invest in mobile data capability for both SIPR and NIPR. This particular investment made huge dividends for DISA and the combatant command during the Ukraine crisis, as the now mature capability enables leaders to travel and maintain reliable, secure communications easily at hand. We also expanded our Defense Information System Network, or DISA, presence eastward. We increased our long-haul transport requirements with the support of industry from 1 gigabyte to 10 gigabyte, and in some instances up to 100 gigabytes, particularly with our long-haul underwater overseas transport cables. In response to a large increase of requirements for SATCOM support, DISA increased SATCOM capabilities across the theater by more than 30%, leveraging commercial satellite bandwidth through partnership with the industry. And finally, we eliminated multiple single points of failure that were across the network, creating a resilient, self-healing network, increasing reliability and accessibility, and creating a better user experience. None of these efforts occurred in a vacuum. DISA regularly partners with industry to find the best cost-effective solution to suit the strategic communication requirements that reach to the tactical edge. Here's a list of several areas that we regularly partner with and where industry partners can also provide expertise. OCONUS and cloud solutions provide their own challenges of national data sovereignty laws that differ vastly in Europe from the privacy expectations in the US. In addition, we have a large variety and a large tapestry of telecom providers in the different countries, both national and private, that our network spans across borders. We're always looking for innovative technologies, solutions, and the best way to set the globe and leverage industry practices within our field, and for the unique environment that the European theater presents in our changed security. So DISA adapted quickly to a rapidly escalating solution, despite a previous expectation of relative peace. DISA executed a no-fail mission in the face of an existential threat to democracy and peace in the European continent, and provided a secure, resilient network usable to the warfighter at the tactical edge. DISA drove IT innovation throughout, using its expertise and tenacity to enhance our ability to communicate with our international mission partners. We did this as a team, as partners, and continue to hold the line in support of Ukraine's freedom and European security. Thank you. Any questions? I think there's a microphone right there.
Thanks. On the satellite communications, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about any concerns you have about Ukrainian forces' reliance on Starlink and what you can do to, or what DISA is trying to do to create redundancy or resilience or new satellite communications capabilities for Ukrainian forces.
So we are not actively working with Ukrainian forces on their satellite. DISA did not provide the Starlink capability. That was done mostly through the SAG-U and through the 18th Airborne Corps forces for that communication. So I can't really speak to the concerns on that at this time. Sorry.
Hi, ma'am. First off, great brief. Great to hear what the team out in DISA Europe did to accomplish the support to the Ukraine mission. With that said, I'm sure there are quite a few lessons learned as we work through this as an agency. I'm wondering how can we make sure that we apply these lessons learned to our next focus, our now focused area on the China problem set. Thank you.
So I think there's a lot of lessons learned and applicability from what DISA did for the European theater towards the Pacific theater. For example, the force package that DISA put together for the first time, that force package still stands. Mike actually runs that. It has a list of people ready to go and provide surge support if needed to any theater. So if it is, if the China problem does kick off, they can rapidly deploy and put that expertise to work in the Pacific. I think a lot of the ways that we expanded and upgraded the network are applicable, but the Pacific does pose some additional challenges that the European theater doesn't in terms of the sheer distance and vast size and large overseas areas that it does have. But I think that this was a very good lesson learned for DISA and the communications community in how to quickly respond to a crisis.
I'm always afraid I'm going to blow these things out. Hey, Colonel Klein, can you talk a little bit about some of the processes within DISA that we all accept kind of take a little bit more time than normal, that were kind of sped up, for example, change management and some of those types of processes?
Sure. I think, Mike, do you want to take that one?
Sure, no problem. So through planning is how we accomplished many of the goals that we were trying to get through. We worked, the OPT was meeting every day. So we had not just the individual planners from headquarters, global, and the field office, field commands involved, but we had all the senior leaders involved. So every day, twice a day actually, we were syncing up, making sure we had everything done. So we were able to have the right people in the room to order push DITCO, IE, and the rest of DISA to get things done much quicker than we normally would have. But I think it worked well, and we've took all those lessons learned, and we've prepared them for the next issue, whatever that may be.
I think we have a few minutes next before we transition to the Five Eyes panel. Do we have any other questions out there in the audience? Okay, thank you very much for your time and attention. We are now going to transition in the next 5 to 10 minutes. We will have the DISA Five Eye Alliance panel with our mission partners up here to talk a little bit about that alliance and how they are supporting within DISA and communications challenges within their own theaters and forces. So please stay around or come back in the next five or so minutes and we will get that started. Thank you.